It's easy to be a great superhero when you have great superpowers, something like super speed or super strength. But what if your superpower is transforming your own bones into anything you could imagine? Are you gonna be a superhero? Or is your condition so difficult that you can't help but become a villain? The tour of the archaeology museum was going well, but Kane was bored. Deeply, deeply bored. He wanted to skip the field trip day. He constantly looked out the window and wondered where his friends were. They had all skipped. But his dad told him if he missed one more day of school, he was kicking him out, sending him to military school. It was unfair. He was 16 years old. He just wanted to be an adult already. The tour guide at the museum spoke calmly, droning on and on and on. The cranial bone is one of the most underrated bones ever. I mean, seriously, without that, humanity never would have evolved to... I wish I got some cranium right now. Hey, Jenny, you want to give me some cranium? Kane said. The tour guide and the rest of the group looked at him. The tour guide looked at him with abject disdain. He got a couple of laughs, but Kane knew when the tour guide looked at him, he was in deep trouble. The tour will continue here. Young man, come see me. Kane put his hands in his pockets and walked up to the tour guide. Look, okay, it's not my fault your tour is boring, Kane said. I don't want to be here, so just let me go and I'll come back at the end of the tour and I won't be disruptive. I promise. He smiled a mischievous smile at the tour guide. Deal? The tour guide frowned, a deep frown. No, we don't have a deal. He grabbed Kane's wrist. Kane was surprised that he even touched him, but the tour guide's grip was strong, really strong. Strangely enough, it felt like the bones of the tour guide's hand were gripping him. And something pierced Kane's hand from the tour guide's wrist. Ah! Kane said. He pulled his hand back and he was bleeding onto the floor. The tour guide smiled a sickly smile. So little manners these days, really. I'm happy I can teach at least one of you to be civil. He adjusted his suit. Why was he dressed so formally, so old-timey? Kane spat in the tour guide's face. Screw this! He ran out of the museum into the city streets. His dad was going to kill him, but he was literally bleeding, and his wound wouldn't stop bleeding. Hey kid, a taxi driver said, waiting at the stand. Are you all right? Kane looked down at his hand, and instead of closing, his wound was getting bigger and bigger. It was almost like his flesh wound was expanding, but Kane put his hand in his pocket and kept walking down the street. Yeah, I'm fine. Kane didn't need help from anyone, even if he did start to feel woozy, strange, faint. He stumbled into a bar and thought that it was weird that nobody asked him for his ID, but he didn't ask questions. He pushed through the door into the bathroom and started running his wound in his hand underwater. But when he saw how big the wound was, a giant hole in the middle of his hand, Kane started to get afraid. What was happening to him? The bathroom door came open, and dressed in the tour guide's pristine suit was a monster with large jagged bones and huge teeth. Kane screamed and the monster roared. Kane woke up in absolute darkness. He blinked his eyes open, but they were covered by something, as if by a sheet. Do not panic, the tour guide said. Your classmates are long gone. Your father has reported you to the authorities. They are quite upset. Kane screamed, Let me out of here! But his mouth felt weird. Cumbersome. You will see this as a gift one day, the tour guide said. Kane shifted and looked at the tour guide, standing above him. But the tour guide was a little man. Why was he so tall? Kane tried to get up, tried to move, but he realized his bones were flat and sharp and jagged. He was a pool of ooze and flesh. He screamed. The tour guide smiled. All it took was for you to be a little respectful, the tour guide said. Let me out of here, Kane said. All of his cool guy facade, all of his class clown, his father had been right. He really had to get his act together. He would take military school over this, anything over this. Did this guy want to eat him? What did he do to him? Kane screamed, and suddenly he felt his arms solidify. He dragged his flesh across the floor of the museum, which was now dark. The skeletons in the Bone Museum looked like ghouls, and the tour guide just chuckled. Focus on what bone you want to create, the tour guide said. Focus with all your might, and Kane thought of the skeleton right in front of him, and suddenly he felt his body go back to normal, completely normal. The tour guide gasped. His arm turned into a blade of bone, and he punched toward Kane, but Kane stumbled backwards, dodging under the blow. The tour guide smiled. If you want to be a bone shaper, you're gonna have to be better than that. The tour guide's back turned into giant spider legs, and he hoisted himself up high over Kane. Kane wanted to scream, he wanted to curl in the ball, but seeing the jagged blades of the tour guide as he ran towards him made Kane know that he had to run. But as soon as he turned away from the skeleton he was looking at, his body went into ooze again, ducking under the spider's attack. The tour guide screamed in rage, "You will be my successor, but first I will cut out your tongue. It is not necessary to be a bone shaper." Kane screamed. He thought about the skeleton again, and again he formed his body back. So he was a bone shaper. He had to shape his bones. Did that mean that he could do the same thing that the tour guide did? He thought about spider legs coming out of his back, but instead of the elegant spider legs of the man running towards him, they just punched through his back. He bled onto the floor. He felt the worst pain he'd ever felt in his life. "We heal," the tour guide said, punching down towards him, "but it doesn't mean we don't feel pain." Kane put his hands up, and his hands turned into a giant shield. He blocked the bone shapers and pushed him aside. The bone shaper's small stature compared to Kane's large frame made him stumble back for just the right moment. Kane wanted to say a cool statement like "see you later," but the only thing he could say was "Ugh," and he stumbled under the legs, running towards the exit. He thought about the bone, the skeleton, the anatomy, as much as he could. But as he ran towards the doors of the prison that would lead to freedom, a street full of police lights, he felt his body turning into flesh, jelly. "That's the thing about being a bone shaker," the tour guide said, ticking toward him with spider legs. "Nobody respects us. They want flashy and cool superpowers, but they don't see the power we hold." Kane felt his back rip open as the tour guide stabbed through his back with his spider legs. "I will reshape you into my successor." He turned Kane over with two of his spider legs, looking at him upside down in the eyes. Kane was flesh, gooey flesh in his hands, molded. "I will turn you into my greatest soldier. I will turn your insolence into strength." The tour guide started to shape him, shaping his face. So he had a giant forehead bone that went over his eyes, huge teeth turning him into a monster. Kane tried to resist, pull his teeth back in, forehead bone, but the tour guide could mold his flesh easily. "Yes," the tour guide said. "Yes." Kane fell to the ground. He tried to shift his bones, but he could just think of the horror in the tour guide's eyes. He felt a few things moving. He sprinted towards the door. The tour guide stabbed through his leg with a spider leg, but Kane thought about his leg melting into jelly. Suddenly the leg went completely slack, and he was able to crash through the glass door of the museum onto the street. Police sirens were everywhere. A scattered group of people outside the doors, policemen. But when they all saw Kane, they screamed. Kane ran through the crowd, but the crowd was running away from him. He saw his reflection in the window. He had been molded into a monster. "Stay down," the police said. They all aimed guns at him. Kane tried to put his hands up, but instead the spider legs went out like knives, facing the police officer. In the shadows of the museum, Kane saw the tour guide smiling wickedly. He beckoned, as if to say, "Come here, be with me." Kane thought about the skeleton, thought about it with all of his might. He didn't want to be bad anymore. He would go to military school if he had to. He just wanted this nightmare to end. He wanted it to be over. He thought about himself, his reflection in the mirror that morning, and he felt his body change. Blam! Blam! Shots rang out, piercing spider legs that went back into Kane's body. He looked at the police officers, completely normal. "Please," Kane said. "I don't know what's happening to me. I just want to go home." The police officers had shaky guns pointing at him. They were terrified of who he was. Kane thought about the knives the tour guide had generated earlier, maybe if he attacked, but that was the thing. He didn't want people to be afraid of him. He didn't want to be hiding in an old museum full of bones. Even if he had to die, he wanted to be himself. He looked at the police officer in the eyes. "Please," Kane said. The police officer looked at him in the eyes, holding the gun to him, and he put it down. "Investigate the museum," the police officer said. "We have to." The tour guide roared. A giant bone creature crawled out. The police officers opened fire, but it did nothing. He was a homunculus of giant bones, almost like a colossus with a bit of flesh attached in the middle. Kane's eyes widened in horror, but two people were about to be crushed under the colossus's bone weight. Kane sprang into action. He stretched his arms out, and his bones suddenly got 30 times larger. He grabbed the people and pulled them to safety. The colossus stepped down, and the tour guide retracted his bones, looking at Kane in the eyes. He smiled a wide smile. "I haven't fought a shaper in years." His arms went back to blades, but Kane pointed. "He's the villain," he said. "Fire!" And the police officers understood the command, somehow. They opened fire on the tour guide's normal form, piercing through his flesh, even his face. And that slowed him down for just the right moment. Kane ran towards the tour guide. He didn't even want to be normal anymore. He just wanted the nightmare to end. And he put his hands out into blades. The tour guide put his hands up in a shield, but Kane stabbed under it right into his face. Shunk. You couldn't really kill a bone shaper, but the wound he had dealt to the tour guide had changed history forever.